Good morning. Welcome to the Friday edition of the NBA Betting Show. With us, as always, Mike Lockey from LivePokerCoaching.com, Matt Maselman from DraftKings Show The Slate, from his own podcast, Studying the Sharps. I am Mike G, and I've woken up in a world where I'm wondering, is DeAndre Jordan good? Matt, let's talk first about that Denver-Portland game last night. What are your takes?
Okay, yeah, pulling up the scores from yesterday. I don't even know if we should be happy about how this game went. Like, we did really well in breaking it down, I think. And we also, like, the model outperformed the market on this game. Or at least the opening market. Because we like Denver at +1, 1.5. We gave this huge, in-depth breakdown of how we should handle DeAndre Jordan maybe playing or not playing. But before we knew if he was going to be in the game or not, Denver actually closed as the favorites for this game. So the model had the Nuggets at minus 1.6 as the projected line, and the actual line was +1.5. And then the closing line wound up being around 1.5 or even -2. It was kind of like some of each across the market, which was a really big deal because Denver won the game by 1 point. So if you bet this one on the closing line instead of in the morning, you might have even lost your bet. On the closing line, you definitely lost your bet. At depending what point in the day, you either got a win or a loss on Denver. We didn't have any value here. We just beat the market with no news. We were just ahead of the line movement because the opening number was bad.
Right. So I know we're going to talk about DeAndre and some live betting options that were out there. But if you're going for the simplistic route, if you're watching the show yesterday, we were recommending that Denver +1 that you could have gotten in the morning. So if you got that either with the points or if you got aggressive and took the money line, you came out ahead. So let's talk about DeAndre. He was projected for 0 minutes. He ended up with 7 minutes in each half. Let's talk about what did you do anything live when he came in, or did you just have your pregame bets?
So I knew I wasn't going to be home, so I just went with the half-unit bet on Denver at +1.
Okay.
And we still, whether you had +1, +1.5, money line, you just had the game at Pick'em, whatever, you still needed Jamal Murray to make the 3 at the end of the game for any of those, because they were down by 2 on the final shot. So we weren't covering without him making no matter what number, however we played it, whether it was the spread or the money line. But yeah, as far as DeAndre, I knew I wasn't going to be around for it. So I just went, I think it was like 0.6 something units or whatever that I had on Denver, and I just left that alone. It was a money line bet. I think I had them at +101. It was a weird money line,
good bet.
But that was what I found. +101 on the money line.
So let's say you were home last night, watching intently, and saw DeAndre come to the scorer's table. Do you think you would? What would you? It's tough to jump back in time, but what do you think you would have done?
I would go so far to say Matt recommended being very careful here and really considering hedging here. So it did factor a little bit in mind. But Matt, go ahead with your thoughts.
Well, I from looking back on it, I know the score margins when he was going to check in made it so you were not going to be able to get a middle because Denver.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I ended up with Blazers -1.5, right? And so my thinking was clearly there's now a more efficient Portland team than a more efficient Denver team on the floor for the next, let's call it 6 to 8 minutes. Portland did open. I think they had an 8-point lead at one point in this. Something like 38-30 was the score at a certain point early into DeAndre's check-in. And there did open up a line at the time. I want to say it was Denver +5.5. And I got greedy. I chose not to take it at that. Pretty regretful of that. But
just the Burger King ad is just every time I try to find a box score, go into it. Okay, you can keep. Okay, so how did that end up concluding for you?
So I ended up. I took the bet immediately for 1/3 of a unit. We had a half unit on Nuggets. I added a third of a unit right when DeAndre checked in. I actually saw him at the scorer's table while the ball was still live. I was glad about that. And there was an opportunity, like I said, there was a 5.5 available, but then Denver made a few 3-pointers and the gap ended up closing. I am seeing his final plus minus in those in that time here.
The first he was -1 in the first half and plus 10 in the
-1
second half, which is.
But like I said, right when it started, I think Portland went on a 6-0 run early on, right when he checked in, and then I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. I'm going to wait for this huge value to Denver plus 8.5 to open up, because they're just going to go on this like 15-4 run that I was hoping for. Obviously, that didn't happen, and it's impossible to know when to pull the trigger. And I also I'm curious what I guess actually I probably should have been studying the money line a little bit more, just in the sense that I could have an understanding of what that 5.5 is actually worth. And, the type of middle I could have been opening would have only been 4 points at the time, based on the other live bet that I had made. Right. So it's just, I'm not afraid of making several bets on the game in different directions when I believe there's going to be value on each individual bet for the rest of the game, because of the game flow, because of the rotations. I didn't do this in the second half. I was watching the game still. I wasn't paying attention when he checked in, so I kind of missed it, but I was watching how it ended up going. And in the results wise, looks like in the third quarter it was +1, and then actually in the fourth quarter the rest of it was +9. So I think that was just shooting variance, and obviously those things happen. So I don't know what I learned necessarily, and actually I thought this to myself many times last night. How do I watch this without being results oriented? How do I watch this without confirmation bias? Oh, I'm right because of this. Oh, I'm wrong because of this. But I want to do a little bit of that, but not too much of it, right? So it's this battle that I was having while I was watching. So, Matt, obviously I said a lot. I went a lot of different directions there. That was how I was interpreting the data in real time. What do you think about that? What's your stance? Am I trying to get a little fancy at -115 odds
Certainly.
in general? Maybe, go ahead.
So to give people what to do with these sorts of things in the future, I think the number one takeaway I have is that you always want to be price sensitive. You don't want to just play a hunch if you can't. You can estimate quantifying it. We can't even quantify everything perfectly. We're using a model that really, for the most part, is an estimate. So you want to be able to be mathematical and try to quantify what you can in any decision, and to just blindly do anything is always going to be wrong. So it sounds like for some of your thought process, you were in one camp, and for some of your thought process, you were trying to get a little fancy. But I think the way to make sure that you're not you're not going to get things perfect when you're trying to act in real time, but the way to make sure that you don't mess up too badly is always keep in mind what is the threshold that I need for this to make sense, and am I at least a little bit above it? So I think the way I would have handled this, because I didn't see the closing line until after the game, but given that we had Denver projected -1.6, assuming DeAndre was out, and then they closed it at -2. We actually, when DeAndre was coming in, it wasn't even a hedge against Denver anymore. We might have had a plus EV bet on Portland just outright. So the issue there is the game has already happened, and there's already points being scored, and it's not 0-0 again. So you now have to take that and combine it with your knowledge of the score at the time. And so I just checked it on my phone so we don't have to deal with these ads popping up on my computer again when I go into play-by-play. But Denver was down by 3 when DeAndre checked into the game the first time. If you could have gotten Portland at plus 100 then, which I think may have been possible because Denver was a 2-point favorite. Maybe that's early enough in the game.
I agree when the way they price these live bets, it absolutely matters which side's the favorite. So I feel like you've circled around that point, but you haven't exactly expressed it in that clearly. The difference between each side being 1.5, I think has a big difference in how the live betting is priced.
Right. They'll take it into account more which team was favored. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but regardless, it would have mattered a lot what the line was at the time DeAndre checked in. Because Portland was an underdog before the game, my hunch is that even though they were down by 3, you might have been able to get them at near even money. And because we had Denver at even money, that might have been enough for me to just say, I'm going to get out of my bet. Like, I'm just going to bet the other side. We have a marginally plus EV bet on Portland now. I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to hedge out of the bet and have nothing on the line because DeAndre Jordan is coming into the game and he kind of removes our value anyway. Like, just to go back to it, if we knew that DeAndre was going to play whatever minutes, 14 minutes, and Portland was +2, we actually would have liked Portland at +2. So yeah, we would have actually hit both in this case, but we didn't know if DeAndre was going to play. But it actually is true that the model would have liked Portland at +2 if we projected DeAndre Jordan to play 14 minutes.
And DeAndre Jordan checks in. I feel like I like Portland -1.5. I feel like that is
-1.5 though at -115. Like that, yeah. I don't think it was plus EV at the time, because like your threshold there, they need to have something like a 56% win probability for that to make sense. Not 56% to cover -1.5, but 56% to win the game. Like you're paying you're paying that extra 1.5, which turns out could have been very relevant. Plus the increased VIG because it's a live bet, which I think is an important thing for people to remember, that when you live bet, you're generally paying a higher, like the book has a larger hold on the live betting market.
Very true, and that is absolutely one of my cautions, and why I'm trying to be careful here. But if a guy's 14 minutes can tank a team rating that much, when you go from arguably the #1 rated player to the 300th rated player in a rotation, I agree the juice is super relevant here. Obviously, every detail matters, but I just see this as a really potential opportunity for, like, what is the projected plus minus for DeAndre Jordan in that amount of time?
Well, just remember, we're comparing him to the other backups. We're not comparing him to Jokic. It would be way different if that was like Jokic picking up his 3rd foul in the first quarter.
My point is that the team rating is formed with roughly a 2/3 Jokic, 1/3 DeAndre Jordan rotation right now.
Yeah,
right?
Well, the team rating with 2/3 Jokic, 1/3 like Green, Chanchar, Braun, who isn't even a center, but whatever, they can play small ball. That team rating versus the one where it's just Jokic and DeAndre is about a 1 to 1.5 difference, which is what we're kind of talking about. So, like, that's not enough to lay significant VIG on a market where we basically have it as a neutral bet. Like, if I were doing that at the time and I saw you'd have to bet Portland at -1.5 at -115, I would have just I would have left it alone. I don't think there was enough there to go with that. And then in the second half, when Jokic checked out of the game, Denver was actually down by 8 points. So at that point, like, there's no middle. You're actually opening yourself up to lose both bets if you were to bet Portland at that point, because you've got Denver plus 100, and then you'd be laying like -5 on the Blazers, and then you can actually lose both things, which almost happened. So I think if I had been following this closely, I probably wouldn't have done anything, given what you said the lines were. It's important to always be price sensitive, though, because you don't want to compound a minus EV bet with another minus EV bet. And then in the long run, you're just going to lose more money by doing that. So it really just depends. Like, if Denver had been down by 3 when Jokic checked out of the game in the first quarter, and for whatever reason the market had
Portland... That is what it was.
Yeah, but if for whatever reason at that score the books had priced Portland at like plus 105 on the money line, then we're having a different conversation. Then that's a legitimately plus EV bet, just knowing that DeAndre is going to play whatever 10 or so minutes the rest of the game. Like, there's no timing issue that is required to make that a good bet.
Here's actually my largest point. My largest point is that at that time, I am curious what percentage of the time a relevant middle will be opened up because DeAndre's on the court. So it's almost like a closing line value conversation, right? I was very interested in Portland -1.5 because I was certain there was going to be a live line of Portland minus 5.5 in the next few minutes, right? So it's in my mind, this like very short term, I'm going to have this closing line value. So I'm interested in Portland for these reasons, blah, 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 blah. So when like, it's almost like when I feel like the game's going to swing a certain way or it's going to go a certain way, my interest is attack because the game's going to go the way that I'm wanting it to, right? And obviously I don't know everything, and I'm obviously like was wrong to some degree, right? Because he had a decent plus minus the second run. So
somehow
the desire to attack is because I feel like the line is going to be moving in the next few minutes.
Yeah, it's too much confidence in that potential outcome because Denver with DeAndre on the court versus, let's just call it, to give the most generous interpretation here, DeAndre on the court versus the Blazers starting lineup. That
Nurkic checked back in for 2 minutes against him also, I noticed.
Okay, so like let's make it the most extreme it can be. Even in that scenario, Portland is like 8 points better than Denver per 48 minutes, which gives you like 2 points per quarter, and we're talking about half a quarter. It's like Portland is only supposed to extend the lead by 1 in a span of 6 minutes with DeAndre in the game. Like to expect that they would go for
what does it look like when Jokic is in that rotation?
For only 6 minutes, it's not that different because it's such a small amount of game time. Like with Jokic on the court, Denver would be like plus half a point per 6 minutes, and with DeAndre on the court, it's like -1 per 6 minutes because the difference between them is 17 points per 48, but this is 1/8 of a game. It's such a small portion that to expect that Portland is just going to blow the doors open. We've seen that happen a lot, so I get why anyone would expect it because Denver's whole team has cratered at times when DeAndre's in the game, but our actual expectation is that per DeAndre Jordan run, it's like 2 points worse than if Jokic were in for those 6 minutes. But obviously that compounds over a longer game. But for them to go from a 3-point lead to like an 11-point lead is not a reasonable expectation for 6 minutes of basketball. It's not like I'm the center. You know, he's still like he's a bottom 3 player in the NBA, but he's not he can play in the NBA.
Isn't it just a game of streaks to some degree also? Like, don't these things just happen? And it's not like I'm not necessarily like I agree that in the 6 minute stretch there's going to be maybe an expected value of 1. But like, it's also going to like, there's a 100% chance that it's going to move constantly and then land on an EV of 1.
Well, it can move the wrong direction, which is what happened because DeAndre had his best game of the season probably, to be +9 in 14 minutes. Like he never does that. That's within the range of like. That's not that much less likely than it going the other way, especially because score effects are a thing and Denver was losing at the time.
Like I said, I did bet the first time and I observed most of the rest of this time. I was trying not to be trigger happy, even though my instincts wanted to be. But I do think this was a good discussion. I feel like I mostly didn't love the way that I played it, but I don't know. I guess it's probably something just to...
I think we're going to come back and talk. We're probably going to talk some more about Denver when it comes to futures and talking about Jamal Murray's impact if he's back to Jamal Murray from 2 years ago. So we may have some more Denver discussion. Definitely a very interesting live betting situation. But again, for those that were just watching the show, just made the pregame bet at the time, take your half unit or 1 unit of winnings and let's all be happy with that, and let's move on. I think we had a recommendation on the Spurs game yesterday that also ended up being a winner. Let's recap that one briefly. What do you see on that one?
So the half unit or whatever people won on Denver was on top of what had already won earlier with San Antonio, who finally won a game for the first time. It feels like
11 game losing streak last night.
It feels like it's been a decade. It feels longer when you bet on the team in every game of the losing streak.
Yeah, I feel like Pop had a stern discussion with them after the game for winning when they're not supposed to win. But anyway, what anything there other than we had the value pegged, so that was one that did you have a half unit on that one or a full unit?
A full one. Well, we were talking about timing it around Kevin Porter Jr. and I got that one wrong. Like I really thought he wasn't going to play because the Rockets need to lose. Like the Rockets should be happy. Rockets fans should be very happy today.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I thought they would hold him out of the game, but he ended up playing. So what we had talked about was the Spurs were plus 1.5, and if Porter gets ruled out, we're going to have the Spurs projected at like minus 2 point something. We're going to have like 3.5, 4 points of value on the Spurs if he's out. So I was saying, let's just wait till he's out and then bet them, because the line probably won't move a ton, and you can probably get a pretty good bet in once he's ruled out. But he wound up playing, so right before tip-off, there were lines available at plus 2 and 2.5, and money lines around like 115, 118. So we actually got a higher line, which is why I ended up adding.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. We only had the projected line, like Spurs minus half a point, but it was still like 2.5, 3 points of value. So it was in the range of like 3/4 of a unit, 1 unit, depending what number you got. It wasn't an incredibly good bet. Like we really only had that potential if Porter had been ruled out, but it was still a pretty good one. And yeah, I didn't see the game, but it looks like the Spurs had a very, very strong third quarter and early part of the fourth quarter. And I don't know, we'll take it. Like I don't want to spend too much time talking about the Spurs. Like Keldon Johnson played really well, and he has not been doing that lately. So I'm just happy we got the result.
Yep. Sounds
I
good.
think somebody had to win, and we were on the right side. So.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't do anything special here. It's just like two bad teams. We had the underdog. The underdog happened to win this time. It was pretty much a coin flip game. Like, okay, we'll take it.
All right. Blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
More money in the bank account. Sounds good. All right. Heat Clippers. And I think there was a whole, I think we went into like a 12-portion tree if-then scenario.
Yeah.
Butler and others. This ended up being a non-bet, or did you put something down on this one? I know we skipped this one last night.
It ended up being a bet for me because I bet it a day early. So,
yeah, the Heat minus 1.5, right?
Yeah, although the limits at that number were crazy. I did get it at -4 for like 2/3, 3/4 unit bet the night before.
All right, but from yesterday's show, though, there was we gave some if-then scenarios to watch, but none of those warranted a bet as it ended up turning out. So any takes on this game in terms of I guess it'll factor into when we talk about today with
I just want to do like pat on the back for all of us for getting the injury news right, because I actually remember now we did mention Kyle Lowry potentially resting when we broke this game down a day in advance. We didn't say it yesterday, but on Wednesday we were like, Lowry could rest if Butler comes back, because Lowry had to pick up extra burden when Butler sat the prior game against Detroit. So I guess that was cool that happened, but basically we had said like, this is a bet at -4 or less. And if it gets any higher than that, we're not really going to like it. And they won by exactly 5. So, like, the model and the predictions of who was going to be in and out, like, Lockie had brought up the potential Clippers rest a day in advance. Like, if you had access to a lot of sports books, you were able to get Miami at some number short of 5, most likely. You would have at least had the opportunity to do that if you're in a state with enough sports books. So,
yeah, only the sharpest money won yesterday.
Yeah, right. So, I guess, like, at tip-off, we were showing probably a tiny amount of value on the Clippers side. I think the line may have gotten as high as +8, and we had a projection at 7.2. So there potentially would have even been a middle open. I didn't have the other side of it, but the game basically went exactly according to script, and the players who were in and out also went according to script. And it's just like, I guess the reason I'm happy about this one is we've had so much of a struggle over the past week with closing line value and the games just being weird. And this one was like, the closing line value was everything. And the same was true for Denver.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those two games really illustrated like how important that can be. So we've had a bit of a regression to the mean in terms of closing line value importance, which is, it feels good because we do care about that a lot.
Absolutely. All right, so let's flip to today. The New Orleans game is an interesting one with a superstar, according to the ratings, that most people may not even know.
The star is born today.
Right. So let's talk about all NBA Jose Alvarado.
Oh my God.
When I say all NBA, I mean all NBA ratings for 538. But let's talk about this game. His rating and impact on the game, and what we're actually recommending. So New Orleans, Phoenix. Let's go right there.
Okay, so first of all, I think a lot of our +2s are going away. Like we before we got on air, we had a pretty much consensus line at Pelicans +2, and I'm seeing 1.5 basically everywhere now.
Okay.
So the market, I think more of this, like where this line is this overrated Phoenix team that we talked about the other day, or I guess that was yesterday. DeAndre Ayton's player rating has been progressively declining over the course of the season. I don't think he's had a great year. And Chris Paul is on somewhat of a minutes limit still, but Cam Johnson and Jay Crowder not playing is a really big deal. So the Suns team is good for sure, but they're really not a ton better than New Orleans right now. They're like barely better, and New Orleans has home court advantage. So we are projecting New Orleans to be favored in the game, but a lot of why we even like New Orleans in the first place is because Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones are fine. Like, they're good players. They're above average, but they're not their direct backup, but the number one bench player on this team, Jose Alvarado, is rated way, way better than them. So New Orleans team rating, even with Ingram and Jones not playing, actually stays around the same with Alvarado filling in more minutes than he normally would. We are going to get more minutes out of like Dyson Daniels and Jackson Hayes and Kira Lewis maybe. Daniels is the one who is going to play a lot more because those guys are out and he's not very good, but that sort of gets negated by Alvarado playing more. So it kind of gets canceled out by more of a negative and more of a positive from the Pelicans rotation. But so Alvarado's questionable, which is really like, this is the key right now.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. With Alvarado questionable, are we on the fence then? We're just watching the news updates, and if Alvarado's in, then this is a bet. If Alvarado's
break down his offensive and defensive ratings for me.
Oh, sure. Okay, well, yeah, I'll do that first, and then we'll give what's actionable. He's a 1.5 on offense and a 2.8 on defense. His defense is the thing. But I think a lot of people would be surprised that he has a positive offensive rating, but he's just a guy who doesn't really mess things up. Like, he's a low turnover player. He can shoot, as he says. I don't know if you guys have seen the clip, but he's like, yeah, I can shoot. When D'Angelo Russell specifically like called him out in the middle of a game because he didn't know who he was. It was like not really a viral clip, but whatever. Jose Alvarado can shoot pretty well. He passes the ball well. He doesn't turn the ball over. Which is the opposite of Brandon Ingram, who is not a great outside shooter and shoots a lot. Like, his contribution offensively is still positive, but it looks a lot better than it is. Like, Brandon Ingram looks like an elite scorer, and he's a very good scorer, but there's like, the analytics don't fully support the eye test with Ingram. And Alvarado kind of has the opposite thing going, where it's like, you don't really think he's doing much, but he just doesn't mess up, really. And his defense is amazing. I think everyone has clearly seen that. And Alvarado does have a game this year where he scored, I think it was...
He had 38 a couple of days ago?
Yep.
Within the last week.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up his game log so I can see what he's done since then.
Every other day.
He did go 1 for 6 for 2 points in the game after that.
Right. Yep.
But only one turnover, a couple steals. Like, he's going to be good defensively no matter what.
Okay, so in terms of what's actionable here, we're just waiting to hear, and if he's in, what's the line that you're comfortable betting it at?
This one's a little tricky for 2 reasons. I just put in a bet at Bet Rivers because that's the only +2 left that I can find. I think everywhere.
Bet Online had a +2, but they changed it as I was trying to make my bet.
Yeah, the line's moving as we're talking about him.
I think they just used my bet as a reminder to check in.
Yeah, unfortunate when that happens. I think it's a bet at +2 because even if Alvarado's out, we're going to have a projected line at Pick'em. It's a pretty fringe bet at that point to have 2 points of value, but it's not bad even if he's out.
Gotcha.
But the other part of this that makes it tricky is I don't think the market knows the Alvarado impact. So if he gets ruled out or in, I'm not sure the line moves more than half a point in either direction because he doesn't have the name value.
He's under the radar for
sure. He's way under the radar. That's not a joke about him being short. He's just under the radar. He's very small though.
Got it. I am picturing a compilation clip that needs to be done of all the D'Angelo Russell comedy things that have happened on the court. So we had a situation a couple weeks ago where he went to the scores table and forgot to come in. So his team played 5-on-4 for like a minute. And then I'm remembering the clip with Russell guarding Alvarado, yelling over his bench, "Can this guy shoot? Can this guy shoot?"
Oh, there you go.
And Alvarado answered yes. So
you knew what I was talking about. Okay, yeah, that's the thing I was trying to refer to.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So,
stuff.
all right. So we're saying if you have access to Bet Rivers, if you can get a bet in at +2, it's worth it now.
Yep.
Certainly a good bet if Alvarado. It's a really good bet if Alvarado's in. Are we recommending to bet it at +1.5 or +1, even if Alvarado's confirmed
if he's in? So if you can get +2, I would say what I'm doing personally: half unit now, wait for confirmation, and then add more later if he's in. I'm okay getting the second part of the bet at a lower number. Like, I think that's okay. The line also could come back up just for whatever reason. Like, it could, like, the public, I think, certainly is going to be on Phoenix. Although Phoenix did just have, like, the worst game ever. So I may have to backtrack off that one a little. I'm not really sure what the public is going to do here. But the line could move up or down.
That was historically the greatest team in the history of basketball, right?
Yeah, maybe they'll get a pass from everybody because they were playing a team better than any MJ or LeBron team.
There we go.
Or Curry Durant team.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think averaging in here makes sense. So I like +2 now. It wouldn't be a great value if Alvarado's out, but if he's in anything with the Pelicans as underdogs, I think is good. Because we have the projected line with Alvarado in at New Orleans -2.
Yeah, I might want a little +105 money line.
That sounds great if Alvarado's playing.
Okay. All right. So definitely actionable. Again, if you have access to Bet Rivers right now, you can get it at +2. If you don't or can't find a +2 anywhere, wait. If there's Alvarado news, anything with New Orleans and a plus in front of it on points is looking good. All right. Let's move on. Where else is there potential value today based on how the news breaks?
We have 2 games here, but I think one has way more potential with Cleveland and Sacramento.
Okay.
Because we have Donovan Mitchell on the injury report, and Cleveland is on the front end of a back-to-back. Who are they playing again? They're playing OKC tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a much more likely rest spot.
But Mitchell is listed questionable. And I'm just kind of watching the lines here. Bovada just went to 4.5. Everywhere else is 5.5. The reason I'm monitoring is because it could be an indication we're about to like get something.
Right.
Just a reminder for everyone: now would be a good time to log into whatever place you use, because as just
Grizzlies
to like
PR.
Grizzlies PR tweeting about Kennedy Chandler and
that
one. Having the Miami beat writer accounts on yesterday to hear about how the G League team signed Stanley Johnson was kind of a waste of brain space. But sometimes you just have to have the accounts ready, even if you're gonna get dumb tweets sometimes that don't matter for anything. So that one's kind of amusing. But yeah, I'm logging in now because maybe the lines jumping around could be an indication that Cavs are at shoot around now and we're going to get something on Mitchell. It's kind of what I'm thinking. But the key overall here is that Mitchell matters way more to the point spread than De'Aaron Fox, who I think we've seen him come back to earth a bit. Like, he was having such a great start to the year. His rating is good, but it's nothing special. Like, I think we had talked about him as being like a just below all-star or maybe just barely an all-star. Donovan Mitchell is well above that. He's been incredibly good this year, and I think in general is just, he's a top player. So the other part of this too, I think, Sacramento has some pretty competent backup guards.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think the Cleveland backups can work much.
Yeah, they're not. And guys like Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, and then Terrence Davis actually has a positive player rating. As a collective, those three filling in for Fox, we're only talking about like a 1.5 drop. So Fox is not a huge deal, but Mitchell's minutes going to it would be a bit more Garland, but it's mostly going to be like Chetty Osman and Isaac Okoro and guys who are a bit worse than the Sacramento guys. Plus, Mitchell is just better than Fox to begin with. So the potential value here comes from mostly if Mitchell gets ruled out, we have a Sacramento bet. Because Mitchell is worth like 4 points to the spread. Right now, the line is fair. Like, if we found out right now Mitchell is not going to play, we have 4-point edge on Sacramento, which then shrinks to less if Fox is out, but still a 2.5.
You still got to take it, I think.
Yeah, if Mitchell gets ruled out, you definitely want to take Sacramento, even if we don't know about Fox yet.
All right, so for in terms of what's actionable, then main thing is if Mitchell's out, what's the line?
Not seen it shoot around. There it is.
And Donovan Mitchell not seen a shoot around. Yep, there we go.
Okay.
And the line just moved from +5.5 to +4. I didn't log in fast enough. This is a really good example of like how this isn't always going to be an easy thing.
Gotcha. So what do you recommend?
I didn't have a Cavs beat writer to go to for this, but this would have been like if it was.
I was trying not to interrupt you guys, but all three of my books were doing different things. One of them dropped the line, which like I was trying. I almost just like blurted it out and interrupted the thought process.
You can do that from now on for sure.
I was seeing 4.
Yep.
And yeah,
that was a hard one. I mean, that sounds like a guy who probably won't play. Like, he didn't get ruled out, just to be clear.
Right.
But not seeing it shoot around is a potential we're going to get a downgrade to doubtful. Which would mean he's probably not playing.
So what if
you've got a +5 available, I'd take it. That's actionable right now, which I think there are still some.
Kings +5, is Kings +4 good, or is too much value gone?
I think we got to wait at 4, but Matt, your call.
I think I'd get some at 4, even at 4. But if you have multiple sites, then you shouldn't need 4 because there are. Bet Rivers has 5 still. So that's Barstool, that's Bet Rivers, that's Unibet, that's Sugar House. All of those have +5 right now.
Okay. I don't have it, Mike. If you can get it.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that while we talk. But let's move. Let's not worry just about us. Let's talk about our.
Okay. All those lines are now off the board. I think +4 is worth getting some money in, not a full unit, but a bit less, and because he still might play. And also at +4, if Mitchell's out and Fox is out, it's not like a huge value anymore. You know, the projected line we have if both guys are out is only +3. So it's barely even a bet at +4 unless Fox plays.
Gotcha.
So I tried to get as many +5s as I could just now. I did put a little bit in at +4, but not very much. And I think hopefully, yeah. I'm just, let me scroll through my
So the reason I wasn't a little more aggressive in interrupting is that one of the books, Bet Online, actually went to 5.5. So one went off the board, one went down, and one went up. It's no longer available, but like...
Were you on the site itself, or were you on an odd screen?
I was on the site itself.
Yeah, that's really weird. I mean, sometimes it just glitches out for like a split second, and then if you went to actually bet that line, it might not have even let you.
Right, yeah, it is 4 whenever I tried to bet it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next game then. I think
I think we should like lay out what to do from here.
Okay.
Of how to like handle the rest of this game. If Mitchell is ruled out for sure, I think betting +4 is fine.
I agree.
And then if Fox winds up playing, you may be able to hedge back at like -2 the other way. Or it depends where the line ends up. But if both guys are out, +4 is barely positive value. But it's not terrible. And you may get an opportunity to go for a middle because if he's ruled out, it may drop to like -2. And then if Fox gets ruled out, it'll come back up. But we're going to get the Mitchell update before the Fox update now, it seems, which is kind of what we wanted. So I think if you're at +4 now, maybe wait. But if Mitchell is officially ruled out or downgraded to doubtful, then take the +4. I don't think I would take the +4 just this second.
I agree.
But if he's ruled out, then go ahead. And then if he winds up being in... If we got an update right now, Mitchell didn't go through a shoot-around, but he's expected to play, we actually want Cavs -4. because we're going to have a fair line of either 5.5 with Mitchell in and Fox in, or 7 if Mitchell's in and Fox is out. So this projected line for us could be anywhere from 1.5 to 7, depending with what combination of Mitchell and Fox are playing. So Mitchell out, +4 is fine. Mitchell in, -4 is fine. And then you're going to want to like wait for that De'Aaron Fox news and react for a second time when we get that later. But it sounds like he's probably going to be out, given that they do play tomorrow. And honestly, like, the Thunder are more of a rest candidate team than Sacramento. But for the purposes of the Eastern Conference standings, they're the same. Right? Like, the Cavs don't need to beat either of them any more than the other. They're not competing for a spot in the standings with either Sacramento or OKC. So
this Cavs reporter is they have a get it before Twitter via text message with a number on his thing. So maybe we can get a service where these guys can text us before they post it on Twitter. That'd be great.
That would be very nice. Would have been really useful in this case. We would have gotten a couple extra points on this line.
That's probably why the books were ahead on this one, actually.
Maybe. Who knows? There are things that we're just not going to know until we know them, and then it's like, oh, okay, so that was why.
Sometimes the market knows more than we do.
Yeah, the market clearly had Mitchell before it got to Twitter.
Yep.
By like only maybe 30 seconds, but I also want to stress before we go to the next game, like the importance of looking at some odd screen. I really like the unabated one. I think it might be the best one there is. I don't know all of them though, but that's the one I've been using. When you see a lot of flickering and a lot of lines moving in the same game, like log in, get ready for something, because something may be happening. That's been like my recommendation for this. Like, don't just bet a team because the line is moving, but be ready for news to break if the line is moving. So clearly that was what was happening there, because all the Cavs numbers started jumping around, and then finally it got to Twitter that Mitchell wasn't in shoot around. And that all happened just in a span of like a minute.
Bet Rivers is down to 3.5 already, by the way. That's what they have posted right now.
I like +5.
No, plus 3.5.
No, I know. I like the +5 from 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yep. Got it.
But I like -3.5 if Mitchell ends up playing, so we'll see.
All right. Okay. So let's go to the next game. Where is their potential value based on what the tea leaves are saying, who's texting out, what shoe picture is being posted? What do we got?
Okay, for Washington, Indiana, I think we just do this game briefly, and then we'll go to what we're looking ahead to tomorrow, because there's a lot of potential to look out for tomorrow.
Yep. Okay.
And especially now with Mitchell. But Porzingis and Turner are both questionable on the opposite side of the same game. Miles Turner has been questionable. Well, he was last game and played. This could be like sort of a mistake or just a technicality that they have him questionable again. My leanest Turner plays. I'm just pulling up the box score from last game. I kind of watched a lot of that. He seemed to be in the game for enough minutes where like he didn't leave the game early. He was in at the end. So I'm not really sure what's going on with Miles Turner. He played 34 minutes. It was 2 nights ago. But I feel like he's more likely to play than not.
He's questionable. Open parentheses, trade block, end parentheses.
Sure, it could be that too. Yeah. Yeah, it could be that. But just like my gut feel on it is he's closer to probable. But I have no idea. So the thing we want here that creates the most value is probably is for him to be ruled out. But I just don't think we're going to get that. Because if Porzingis plays and Turner is ruled out, we have a fair line of around 1.8. And the current line is Wizards +5. So that would be pretty good. But if it goes the other way where Turner plays and Porzingis is ruled out, we get a fair line of 6.3, which isn't very exciting either. Like, it's going to be hard. Unless Porzingis is in and Turner's out, that first scenario, which I do think is like pretty unlikely. Unless it's that, we're going to need some combination of good timing and good fortune to open up something here. So I'm really just highlighting this, that we have two pretty significant players, both questionable in the same game. And if we get one before the other, maybe it opens up more of an opportunity. But I'm just not sure where we're at here. Like,
I think the market's sufficiently priced right now.
Yeah.
I think that it's hard to find something actionable unless it breaks a certain way. I think I agree with all that. And if it breaks the same way, a certain way, then we'll probably have a bet on Washington +5. But otherwise, I doubt we're getting in here.
But I think if Turner gets ruled out, you can use that as an opportunity to bet Washington right away. But then if Porzingis gets ruled out after that, you're going to want to bet it back the other way. Like either hedge out or cash out or middle or whatever, because Porzingis has a pretty big impact on Washington. This is not a deep team, and they're already without Bradley Beal. So the bench guys are bad, and Porzingis is going to matter a lot. So if Porzingis is ruled out now, I would probably do nothing, I think, because I think the market is assuming I think it's just weirdness because we have Turner there too. But we don't have any value on the Indiana side right now. So for Porzingis to get ruled out, he would need to be worth like a lot for us to push the value from Washington over to being on the opposite team. And he's worth 3 points, so he almost does that, but he's not quite important enough to do that. And then Miles Turner could get ruled out, and then you don't want your Pacers bet anyway. So very confusing game here, but I think just checking in on this one throughout the day could make sense because it's going to be changing. So I have nothing yet here for what to bet on, but this is a game that has two pretty important guys.
All right, so I know we usually wrap with this, but I'm going to point it out now. Keep an eye on the Preaching Sense Twitter account. Matt will provide updates when possible. Again, sometimes the news breaks so fast, there's sending out a tweet after the fact isn't going to change anything. But if he's seeing something that's worthwhile, that's the place to go. Of course, keep your Twitter feed refreshed for Underdog NBA and some of the other sites we've mentioned. But Matt will try to let us know on the Preaching Sense Twitter account when there's something actionable. Yep. All right. Any other games for today, or you want to shift straight to talking about some possibilities for tomorrow since we've got so many of these back-to-back?
Yeah, let's use the Pacers thing as a segue to that game because that's really our main thing for tomorrow. There's some potential other stuff for today, but I think we leave it alone for now. So the Pacers play again tomorrow, and they're playing at home against the Brooklyn Nets. And we saw Jacques Vaughn say on Wednesday that with Ben Simmons returning, or maybe it's more of a coincidence, but he said to the media before Wednesday's game that their number one priority right now is to reduce Kevin Durant's minutes. And Durant has been playing a lot. Tonight is the first game back for Ben Simmons against Atlanta, which it's a semi-important game. Like Atlanta and Brooklyn are both right around the borderline of play-in tournament versus being above the play-in tournament. So I think
that'd be more important than tomorrow's game.
Indiana's kind of there too, though. So this is why I'm a little hesitant to say like they need tonight's game, but they don't need tomorrow's game. All three of those teams are right around each other in the standings. Like the Nets may know that Indiana is going to fade later, but as of right now, Indiana is a threat also. They're actually ahead, I think, of the Hawks. Pacers are 13-12. Hawks are also 13-12. The Nets are 14-12. These teams are all bunched up. Yeah, so I don't think this is going to be about the standings tomorrow as much as like back-to-back going to Indiana, rest spot for Durant makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to throw out there is with that Vaughn comment, does that mean they're going to try to get him full rest games, or are they going to try to just pay, instead of play him 34 minutes a game, play him 30 or 31 a game? Like that's I'm not sure. And I think these two games will tell. Like I think if Durant plays both games and he's more closer to 30 than he is to 35, I think that's I think that's what that comment then will have meant. That they're just trying to not play him to death in the games that he's playing. So it is an interesting one to watch to see if he's out completely tomorrow.
Well, I think there's a little of both. Like, I think the answer to will they rest him or play him less, they're probably going to do both, like over the course of the rest of the year. And with a lot of these rest spots, like Kawhi is different because he's coming off like a major injury. And like they weren't going to play him on the back-to-back basically no matter what. But with Durant, if Brooklyn wins this game by 30 and Durant plays only 26 minutes because it's garbage time, he doesn't need to be in there in the fourth, I think he probably will play tomorrow if that happens.
I think I agree. Mm-hmm.
But if tonight's game is close and he plays like 36 and he's in at the end, then we have a significantly reduced chance of him playing tomorrow. Like, I think the Nets are going to kind of go by feel with him, where if it looks like he's tired, he has a... You go ahead.
I think that's a general concept to consider, though.
Yeah.
So, of these 7 teams that are playing on the front end of a back-to-back, every single one of them are going to make the decisions for tomorrow based on how tonight goes. So, most specifically, if any of these guys go to overtime tonight, well, that's a pretty big indicator to me that, anybody that could get some rest might get some rest tomorrow. If it's a close game, maybe, check the minutes of a few of these guys. If they're normally guys that get 34 minutes and they get 38 minutes, well, then maybe that's an indication that they're going to get a night off tomorrow. And again, similarly, if it's a blowout, any direction, if Washington blows out Indiana, well, I don't think Indiana is going to sit anyone tomorrow. I think they'll play the full team if they're only going to get, 2/3 of their run today. So it's a little bit of an interesting thing tonight, looking at how many opportunities are going to open up in the fourth quarter of the games today.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned the Indiana side of that also, because they're on a back-to-back tomorrow,
Sure.
and we don't know if their guys are going to play. And Turner and Halliburton have both been on the injury report like a lot recently. They've both.
I'm still going to probably be interested in blindly betting the Indiana opening line, not blindly, but like taking the Indiana opening line that makes sense, because obviously Durant's impact on the spread versus most of these Indiana players is going to be wildly different. And I just think of all the entities in that game, I think Durant's the most likely to sit by a lot.
Yeah, I think it's Durant and then probably Miles Turner if Turner plays tonight. But if Turner sits tonight, it could be an indication they're saving him for tomorrow. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I kind of want to put tangible numbers on this of like, if the line is this, what do we think the value is? So I'm just kind of checking what we're going to have as the projected line here. Okay. Just doing, I think we got it. All right. As of right now, if everyone on both teams is playing tomorrow, we're going to have something right around Nets -3 as our fair line. If everyone is in on both teams, that includes Ben Simmons also playing. I think Simmons is more likely to sit than Durant, actually, now that I'm thinking about this. Simmons is returning from an injury tonight. I don't think he's playing back-to-backs yet.
What's his impact on the spread, roughly?
He's not as important as Durant. Simmons is like a 1.5. Durant is like a 4. Halliburton is like a 2.5, and Turner is like a 1.5.
So, fair line 3 if everyone's in.
Yeah.
Let's say Turner out.
Okay.
Simmons out. Durant out. Fair line Pacers -1.
Yeah, that math checks out. Yeah.
So Turner and Simmons seem pretty interchangeable.
Yeah. So if we get an opening
Durant's
line of
worth
like Nets -6, I think you can just bet Pacers +6 right away. It really depends what the opening line is.
I agree with that.
So,
yeah,
and I think
agree.
that probably will be around where it is, right? Like that
so.
Sounds like we're gonna have a bit of value towards the Indiana side. Brooklyn's a little bit overrated. I don't know if Indiana is still underrated, but maybe slightly. I'm gonna guess the line opens.
If I
between,
see Pacers +6, I will be snagging some of that.
Yeah, I mean that might be an optimistic guess of what the line is, but between 4 and 6, I think is very, very likely. So if it's in, let's say it's in that range, anywhere in that range, I think you start to get some money down on Indiana. You will, I think for sure, be able to wait until after the Brooklyn game. Like we're not going to get Durant ruled out for rest tomorrow before tonight's game. That seems very, very unlikely. Like that almost never happens. Where
the Warriors are the only ones that do that really early.
Yeah,
I feel like.
well, where they'll say like we're going to rest our guys tomorrow, but
Yeah,
even they have
say
gotten more ambiguous with their updates. So, like they were doing that a couple of years ago. Now we just kind of know they're going to rest, but they only say it about Klay Thompson.
So we've only really focused on a couple of these spots. There's quite a few still available. Anything else you want to? I guess Indy and Brooklyn we've touched quite a bit on.
Yeah, I think that is the one with the most it's the best combination of high potential for rest and also high potential for value because of the players who might be resting are really important.
Got it.
So that's the one I'm watching for sure. And so if Indiana opens +6, I would just take it right away. If they open like +3 or 4, then I would only take it if the Brooklyn game is close tonight. And if it opens lower than that, you just wait, but be ready to bet Indiana tomorrow morning.
Makes sense.
So it kind of depends what the number is. But yeah, it's certainly one to watch because there's a lot of potential there.
Okay. Any others catching your eye for tomorrow? Worth talking about at this point?
So I know marketing's an issue for Utah tonight. Utah, Minnesota play each other. They're both involved in back-to-backs on the front end. The matchups are pretty similar. So Utah goes Minnesota, then Denver. Minnesota goes Utah and Portland. So it's all these upper middle Western Conference teams. So I think all the motivation will be pretty equal there. I think, marketing, is it an illness he's out with?
Yeah, I think he's not going to be rested. He's going to be dependent on how he's feeling. Like, I could see him sitting tonight just because he's still not feeling great. The player of those 4 teams, there's only one guy in those 4 teams that I think has a shot to be rested tomorrow. And that's Mike Conley, who's returning tonight after being out for like 3 weeks with a knee injury.
I agree with that.
Right? Like, tomorrow, I would actually say he's less than 50% to play.
I agree with that.
But I think the line is going to have that accounted for. Like, I'm not expecting to have a Denver value tomorrow against the Jazz, even with that. Because Denver's going to be like a 7-point favorite or something anyway. Maybe even more. So we're going to be, like, we would have to lay a really big number with Denver. Conley's not going to be...
Anything for the Mavs?
That's the one I want to talk about.
Yeah,
because Luka doesn't rest a lot, but if tonight's game is an especially taxing one.
Yeah, versus Milwaukee, then at Chicago, I could definitely see an at Chicago night off for Luka.
If Luka plays a great game tonight on ESPN in an MVP, I mean, maybe they're just battling it out for number 2 in the race right now, but whatever. It's a game they care about. Luka and Giannis certainly think they're in the... I think they still are. Sort of being facetious. I think
live.
They're all live. I'm not even sure if Tatum really is the favorite. It could still be Luka. But whatever. They're all... MVP is a topic for tonight's game.
Yes.
And there's no question with it also being on ESPN that Luka is going to know that.
Yes.
And it's a late game. They're playing 10 p.m., later game than normal. And tomorrow they're playing Chicago. I think it's a normal time game tomorrow. Yeah, 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
So but whatever, 22 hours later. So a little bit of a short turnaround.
Yeah, I actually think the fact that in Dallas it's a 10 p.m. Eastern game in Dallas, that's a late game to start for most places.
Yeah. And he's going up against Drew Holiday and Giannis all game. Like, it's not going to be an easy one. Assuming the game is close, then I think we certainly want to monitor Luka.
All right,
for
so
tomorrow.
let's pretend Mavs, they play Milwaukee, they go to Chicago. What do you think the fair line should be in that game? Chicago's off today.
Chicago is off today, so I'm going to say if no one is out, just takes like a second to calculate home court advantages. Hold on. Okay. Right around Pick'em probably. Maybe Bulls -1 if no one's out.
So you think that near Pick'em could be the opening line?
Yeah.
Or the fair line. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think both. I think we're not going to have value here. Like, I don't think there's any reason to expect someone's over or undervalued for this game if Luka is in.
Are you if you see a Chicago +2, are you interested in that tonight?
Probably, yeah. I would probably... There's enough of a chance of Luka not playing that if there's a line that opens where maybe we'd be showing like a half point or a point of value on the Chicago side, there's enough upside there where I would just take some. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if it's a site where you can cash out, but that's always true. So, I think looking at Chicago, if they open as underdogs, already a good idea, but I will be closely watching tonight's game, and specifically the box score after tonight's game, because that's really what we care about. If the game is close and Luka plays big minutes, like if he were to play 39 minutes tonight and they win by 5 or win by 3, like they win a close game and he plays a lot, which is barring overtime, our best case scenario, I think there's a 50-50 shot he rests tomorrow, if that happens.
Yeah, I agree. And then I would say one other thing that might even push that to more than 50 is how many of those minutes Holiday's guarding.
Yeah.
Because, I've heard it, I've watched it a lot, but I've heard announcers talk about it as well, that nobody likes playing against the guy. He's so physical. It's like getting hit by a linebacker every play down the floor because he bodies you up and he makes it difficult. So that's just another, it's not just, it's not maybe just 36 minutes, but it's 36 minutes against, one of the more physical defenders in the league. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Anything else major, or we hit the big ones?
I think that's it. So to just highlight the Luka thing, his impact is massive. We do have to give him. Luka is a special case because he's such a high usage player, and he's such a large part of the offense that when we're talking about Dallas being fatigued on the second half of a back-to-back, we're mostly talking about Luka being fatigued. Like, he is the team. So. Right. If Dallas is being dinged by 2 or 3 points for the travel, like 1.5 or 2 of those points are Luka being dinged for the travel, which means that basically Luka is not worth as much to the spread on a back-to-back because he's a tired Luka, and it's already priced in. So normally his impact might be 7 or 7.5 points. This version of him is worth like 5, maybe 6. But that's still more than enough to create a massive edge.
So what I'm hearing is it would be Chicago -5 roughly if Luka's out.
Yeah.
And because of that, any +1s or +2s Chicago's I see very likely gonna take a nibble.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like if Luka were ruled out for tonight's game, we'd move the projected line by like 8 points. But that's, he'd have to have a COVID test probably for that to happen. But for tomorrow, he's still going to move it like 5 or 6. So yeah, if tonight's game is close, definitely watch it. If Chicago opens as an underdog, I think maybe it's worth even betting some already. But if Chicago is still an underdog and tonight's game is close, I'm probably going for like a unit or 2 before we even get to tomorrow morning, and then just looking to add even more once it's confirmed.
Got it.
Like, this is not one where you want to wait fully. And I think the same is true with Indiana, which is why I think it makes sense to have fixated on those 2 games. Like, Mitchell could play tonight, sit tomorrow. Like, there could be other combinations of players, but the Durant and Lucas spots are, like, massive impact and also, I think, the highest probability ones.
Right. I think it's fair to say that, the guys with the biggest impact that we're always keeping an eye on are Luka, Durant, and Alvarado. So pretty much a slam dunk for those 3 guys. All right, so we got some potential value for today, some really interesting spots potentially for tomorrow. Again, keep an eye on the Preaching Sense Twitter feed. Matt will try to keep us updated as the day goes on if there's actionable news. And we'll be back tomorrow, hopefully to recap another, let's keep the winning streak going. Let's keep the good vibes happening. And we will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. See you guys.